Hi, everybody. Mayor?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I just want to take a moment to welcome everyone to today's virtual reunion program, Morse Mountain Updates with Caitlin Cleaver. She is the director of Bates Morse Mountain Conservation Area and Shortridge Coastal Center, and Bates Outing Club's social gathering will follow. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we get started, I'd just like to take a few moments to remind everyone of some housekeeping items for the program. First, we encourage everyone to make sure that you can add your class year to your name display so that we can see everyone who's coming from various decades across the alumni community. Also, a live transcription is available for anyone who needs it. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can toggle the captions on and off by clicking that live transcript button. The chat feature has also been set up to allow you to chat individually amongst yourselves, with everyone, and also directly with the host. We do ask that you please keep yourself on mute during Kate's presentation, and then we will open it up afterwards for Q&A. If you'd like to see more of your fellow alumni during this program, you're more than welcome to watch the program in gallery view. And if you prefer to focus on the presenter, you can choose speaker view as well. You'll see that view button in the top right-hand corner of your screen. We are also recording this session so that alumni who are unable to attend can watch it at a later date. And now I will turn it over to my colleague, Stephanie.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to take a few minutes to introduce you to our guest speaker, Caitlin Cleaver. She is in her second year as director of the Bates Morse Mountain Conservation Area and Shortridge Coastal Center. Kate has worked on coastal issues in Maine for almost a decade and is excited to engage Bates students and faculty in research and educational activities at BMMCA. Most recently, she was the marine science lead at FB Environmental Associates in Portland, Maine, where she studied lobster fishery and right whale interactions. Prior to that, Kate spent 4 years as the director of research at the Hurricane Island Center for Science and Leadership in Rockland, and where she established a research program focused on answering community-driven questions in partnership with local fishermen and aquaculturists. In addition, as if she's not busy enough with everything else in her life, she is also a doctoral candidate in ecology and environmental sciences at the University of Maine, where she earned master's degrees in marine biology and marine policy. She also holds a master's in public administration from Columbia University and a BA from Colby College. Bates is very lucky to have her, and she's great. So I know we're going to have a very interesting conversation, and you can take it away, Kate.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie and Meredith. And hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be a part of Reunion and to give you an update on Bates Morse Mountain and Shortridge and what's happened over the last year. So I'm just going to take a second to share my screen. 1 second. Okay. Can everyone see the slides? Yes. Awesome. Great. Okay. So just a reminder, which I'm guessing I don't need to do this, but Bates Morse Mountain Conservation Area is managed by Bates College, and we manage it for research and education and conservation, and then allow public access through our parking lot. And it is just an incredible asset. I really have loved coming to know the place over the last couple of years. And I'm really excited by the opportunities that it presents for faculty and students to do coastal research that really has meaning at a broader scale for the state of Maine and beyond. So just a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to reflect on the year plus of COVID and how we responded at the conservation area and what we did with the Shortridge Coastal Center. I'll talk a bit about trends in public visitation and how 2020 was a bit different than in years past. I'll talk about the educational activities that happened in 2019 and in 2020, because 2020 was just a different year, as I'm sure you all No. I will also give an update on research and monitoring that is happening in the area, both by students and by faculty and others. We'll talk a bit about shorebirds, a success story from 2020, which is really exciting. The plover population is doing well, which is great. I'll touch on some management efforts that we have going on in the conservation area, and then talk about the year ahead. So with the coronavirus upon us in March of 2020, we ended up closing the conservation area to the public. We basically put a chain across our entrance to the parking lot for April and May to just give us a chance to understand a bit more about the transmission of the disease and the risk that it posed and what it meant to be outside. So we just thought it best to sort of spend some time thinking about that and track what was happening with the pandemic. And then we reopened in June to the public, and we did reduce the number of parking spots so that there could be physical distancing between vehicles. We went down, we have generally 33 spots when we're operating at normal capacity. We went down to 27. So it wasn't a huge difference. And then we did put signage to just remind visitors to stay 6 feet apart from each other, especially at the top of the mountain and at the entrance to the beach, just these high traffic areas where people like to gather. And then we ended up closing Shortridge Coastal Center for the remainder of the 2020 academic year through that summer and this entire last academic year. We were going to reopen this summer to a team of visiting researchers from UNH, University of New Hampshire, who study birds, shorebirds, but they ended up having a change in their field season. So the building is going unused again this summer, which is really disappointing. But I'm excited. I think next academic year we'll be able to reopen to student groups, staff, and faculty. And some of the things that we saw with COVID, there was definitely an increase in the number of people coming to be outside in the area. And I think that is a trend that all, land trusts, state parks, all of these places experienced an influx of people who were getting outside, maybe for the first time, and exploring their natural areas nearby to their homes. So we had a lot of vehicles. Our gatekeepers were extremely busy turning vehicles away. But all in all, it was a good year that we were able to operate safely in. So then turning our attention to public visitation. So when our gatekeepers are on staff, which they work basically full-time May through mid-October, they track the number of visitors who pull into our parking lot during business hours, basically 9 to 5. And then Dawn, our lead gatekeeper, who has been working with us for 16 years. So if you get to Bates Morse Mountain this summer, please give Dawn a big congratulations for doing this work for 16 years. But Dawn will go down to the conservation area on nice days throughout the remainder of the year. So we have sort of sporadic data of visitation over the entire year, but primarily from May to October. So these numbers are driven largely by that May to October season. So on the y-axis, we have the number of visitors, and on the x-axis year, and we started tracking visitation in 2006. And you can just see, the gray line represents the actual numbers on an annual basis, and the red line is a 5-year moving average. And you can just basically see that, the cat's out of the bag. People love this area and really do come here for the natural beauty of it and, the hike into the beach. So it is really popular. But I would also note that from a conservation perspective, we're actually doing quite well. And the Nature Conservancy, who holds a lot of the conservation easements in the area and we monitor the easements on an annual basis. Nancy Safira says that we're doing such a good job on the conservation, largely because the public accesses the beach with one trail. So a lot of the use is restricted to that trail. So that's great. So it means that we don't have to do too much with these increasing numbers just yet. And this is just another look at the visitation numbers over time. So the first row in this table here, total visitors, just shows you that since 2017, even a little bit before that, we've had over 20,000 people per year visiting the area. And that Don and Frank generally work, between 160 to 180 days each year at the gate, at the booth. And then, so that means that we have an average of visitors on those gatekeeping days between 124 or 123 and 130. So it's a pretty popular spot. And I can see why. So for educational activities, again, I just put 2019 up here as well as 2020, because in 2020, we found that group trips to the area were greatly restricted because of, virtual school and other changes to everyone's activities in 2020. So in 2019, we had more than 600 individuals who were part of, 12 school groups, 5 colleges that made 12 visits, 4 of which were Bates courses. We had 11 camps come in the summer months, over 18 visits, and 8 different clubs and groups that range from walking clubs to outing clubs. There's just a wide variety of use of this area for educational purposes, and it's anything from ecology to team building exercises, to senior classes of different local high schools just spending a day on the beach. So it's a really, really popular area for that. And I'd also say for these numbers, take it with a grain of salt, because rarely do people reach out to me and tell me that they're coming or planning to make a trip, and they don't always come on days that Don and Frank are working. So there could be a lot greater educational use of the area than we know about. Then in 2020, we logged about 200 people being parts of different groups. And I just listed out what those groups were because they were sort of sporadic. We had the Brunswick Boy Scouts, we had the Boat and Outing Club, a Bates course taught by Bev Johnson, Chewonki Foundation came, Hyde School Outing Club, Senior College. So again, just a wide variety of use of the area for educational purposes. One highlight was the Senior Walking Club at USM came and organized a hike with Bates professor Mike Rattel, who's in the Earth and Climate Sciences department. And, they had a group of 25 people. Mike took them on a tour of the marsh and the beach and spoke about his long-term research in the area, monitoring sediment transport of the beach, and talking about how the beach is responding to sea level rise. And you can see this quote here. I'll give you a minute to read it, but it's from Ray Garcelon, who's a 62 alum and the coordinator of the Walking Club. So I really like this example because it's just a nice confluence of the education, research, and the conservation opportunities at Bates Morse Mountain. So research and monitoring that's happening specifically with student projects. So I would say the area gets a lot of access by students doing their theses work, and primarily from the Earth and Climate Sciences Department and the Biology Department. We're starting to engage more environmental studies program students in projects down in the Phippsburg area. And I'm looking over at my notes because I don't want to mess up the number of student theses that we had in the last 2 years, but there were 11. There were 11 student theses in the last 2 years, in 2019 and 2020. Brett Huggett of the biology department had 3 students each year, and he studies the pitch pines. And so his students' projects focused on the coastal forest and the changes that we're seeing in the coastal forest in response to climate change, as well as the lichen population. And then Bev Johnson oversaw a number of students doing marsh research and looking at the migration of the marsh in response to sea level rise in the area. And then we also had students working with Mike Rattel doing the beach profiles and the sediment transport and looking at changes in those dynamics, seasonally and over time. And then we also had the Phippsburg, town of Phippsburg is undergoing its comprehensive planning process right now. And so we engaged a number of different students that were supervised by Frances Eanes, who's in the environmental studies program. And they assisted the Comprehensive Planning Commission in exploring town ordinances that could help towns adapt to sea level rise. So that was pretty exciting. And actually, I think, again, just highlights the opportunities to basically raise the scientific capacity of the Pittsburgh Peninsula and really support communities in making informed science-based decisions, which is really exciting. So some ongoing projects that we have in the area that are carried out by faculty and students tend to engage in, when they work for us for the summer or during a class. But we are doing rocky intertidal monitoring at Hermit Island. If you know the area well, the Bates Morse Mountain Conservation Area well, you'll know that we don't have much rocky intertidal habitat. But that's being led by Katie Dubkowski, who's a visiting professor in the biology department. As I mentioned in the previous slide, Brett Huggett, also in the biology department, is doing long-term pitch pine research in the area. We are doing southern pine beetle monitoring in partnership with the Nature Conservancy. And here you see Don. Can you all see my mouse moving? If I move my mouse, okay, great. So here you see Don Bruce, our lead gatekeeper. And this is the the southern pine beetle trap. So basically we put this out in May and we monitor it and collect the insects that get trapped by this device. And we're looking for the southern pine beetle, which is a pest that is likely to expand its range into Maine as we continue to see warmer temperatures. So the Nature Conservancy is working to identify as soon as this pest comes into the state. So they have multiple places along the coast that they're monitoring for this particular organism. Then we also do the sediment elevation tables, which are permanent on the Sprague Marsh. There's 4 of them. And these sets, as they're affectionately called, are our way of basically tracking how the marsh is responding to sea level rise. So we go out on an annual basis in August, and we literally, you can see in this picture here, I'm helping Bev do these measurements, but you kneel on a little bench, a metal bench, so that you're above the marsh and you're not affecting your measurements. And you're basically measuring, millimeters of sediment that has come onto the marsh over that last year. And the idea is that over time, we'll be able to see how the elevation of the marsh is changing. And the idea is that if allowed to, marshes can migrate in response to sea level rise. So they basically just move back or expand in different directions to avoid that inundation of sea level or of ocean water. And so we're tracking that over time at the Sprague Marsh. And we also are doing vegetation surveys in tandem with the sediment elevation tables. And this is just to understand how the vegetation is changing on the marsh in response to the sea level rise and the changes in the hydrogeology on the marsh. And that's really led by Bev Johnson. And 2 of our students this summer will help us do this again in 2021. And then again, we're just going to keep those beach profiles going because Mike Rattel's built up such a long time series. And I'm sad to say that Mike's retiring at the end of 2021. So we definitely have to make a long-term plan to make sure this long-term monitoring continues into the future. The other thing I want to mention, and I don't know if Stephanie can drop the link in the chat for this, or you can look for it on our website. But a couple years back, Laura Sewell, my predecessor, had a student who put together a story map of all the research that has happened at Bates Morse Mountain over the last 4 decades. It has not been updated. This map hasn't been updated since Laura retired, but I'm hoping that we can get it up to date this summer. And basically, it just has point locations and brief descriptions of the different projects that have happened throughout the area. And the colors, I believe, are different departments. And then the shape represents what decade the research happened in. So I think that's a really exciting way to share with a broader community all the work that is going on at Bates Morse Mountain. It's really exciting to see how much research is happening and how much it gets utilized for that purpose. And then I also want to touch on the broader impacts of the research. So another success of 2020 was that the Maine Climate Council, which I believe was like a 60-person body or something close to that, continued its work over Zoom. And so this was brought together by Governor Mills. And basically they were charged with coming up with a 4-year plan for climate action to meet a number of goals that the Mills administration had outlined. And so there was a coastal marine working group that Bev Johnson, the professor in the Earth and Climate Sciences at Bates, served on. And I actually taught my class in Module D about this report. And in going through it with a fine-tooth comb, there were so many tidbits that were just really relevant to Bates Morse Mountain. So there was a big emphasis on blue carbon and this ability of coastal systems like salt marshes, eelgrass, and seaweeds to basically sequester carbon, and that they actually are able to do it at rates higher than forests. And so there's a real push to catalog the state's blue carbon potential and to protect and restore places so that they can sequester carbon as efficiently as possible. And so the Sprague Marsh is one of those places that is really, really important to this equation that was mentioned in the Maine Won't Wait Climate Council report. And the other thing the report highlighted was the value of long-term data sets to understand the change that is happening on the coast. And so, it just reiterates the value of, data sets like Microtel's and Bev Johnson's and other student work that has happened in this area, and having those data to talk about how changes are happening along the coast and how communities, again, can make informed decisions about adapting to coastal change. Okay, shorebirds, another positive story. These are the numbers from 2019 for plovers and least terns, both statewide and at Seawall Beach. And 2020 bested 2019. We had, 89 nesting pairs in 2019 statewide, and 98 pairs in 2020, 175 plover chicks successfully fledged. This is statewide. Sorry, I should have reiterated that. Statewide, 175 chicks successfully fledged in 2019 and 199 in 2020. On Seawall alone, we had 18 chicks in 2019 and 23 chicks in 2020. And I talked to the head bird biologist at Audubon a couple of weeks ago, and she said she's like cautiously optimistic about the plover population, but she doesn't want to get complacent because that's what happened in the past, and then the population plummeted again. So we're cautiously optimistic that the population is starting to stabilize. And she also mentioned how wonderful it is to come to Seawall because it's so well protected, and nothing like some of the beaches to the south that get, a lot of use, a day use and whatnot. So again, I think that's just a nod to the good work that goes on at Bates Morse Mountain and the arrangement that there is between the Small Point community, Bates, and the St. John family in the area. So just quickly on management, you saw some of the pictures in the slideshow coming in, and I know probably some of you have participated in the beach cleanups, but we were unable to do volunteer beach cleanups in 2020. So the staff and Bates Morse Mountain Conservation Board member, also a Bates alum, helped us pull about 70 traps off the beach this past May. We are looking to do beach cleanups more often because I think we are seeing increasing storms in the fall. And so we would like to do a beach cleanup in the fall as well, just to clear the beach before the winter sets in and after the shorebirds leave. So stay tuned because maybe we'll be able to do an in-person beach cleanup in October. I'm looking at Stephanie, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. Other management, this summer, I'm actually going to be working on a fire management plan, a forest fire management plan Because we've had a couple years of drought, I think it's really important to think about how we would extinguish a fire if it ever happened in the area. And I think that's it from the management perspective. One tool we did come up with in response to sort of this increasing public use of the area and the number of vehicles that Don and Frank have to turn away, which just creates a safety hazard down on the road. We set up this website where basically we tell the public when the parking lot is full. And I should back up and say that we use the parking lot as our management tool. So basically that gives us a sense, that allows us to control sort of the number and the use of the area. And so once the parking lot is full, we turn away additional cars. And I sort of leave it up to the discretion of Don and Frank when they will let more cars in after cars leave. And so we thought that we might save some people a trip by creating this website that they can check before they make their drive down the peninsula, the Pittsburgh Peninsula, and then come to find out that the parking lot is full and get frustrated that they aren't able to hike the mountain. So if you're planning a trip to Bates Morse Mountain, I recommend checking bmmparking.com, which this is also on our website. So check that out. So then the year ahead, I just finished the annual report for 2020, 2021, and our annual reports from 2015 to the present are available on our website. So check those out. There's a lot of detail in there that I wasn't able to cover today. We are looking to do updates to the booth in the parking lot. Don is finding, with the area becoming increasingly busy, he's there more in the shoulder seasons, and that booth isn't insulated in any way. So we're hoping to connect it to the electric grid and just, put some heat in it. So he's able to be there more comfortably in the shoulder seasons. Shortridge, we're looking to possibly get a heat pump and become more efficient in that way. And then reopening towards the end of August, we already have some faculty retreats scheduled, which is really exciting. I already mentioned this. I'm working on a fire management plan. I'm hoping to also update the research permitting process. And then we've hired 2 students, both rising seniors and both majors in the Earth and Climate Science Department, to help with research and managing visitors this summer. So I'm really excited to bring them on board in 2 weeks or a week, next week. We will continue the beach profile monitoring, the sediment elevation table monitoring, as well as other projects. There's a forest monitoring protocol that we need to implement that was started back in 2017. So we'll be doing that. Again, just this emphasis of keeping these long-term data sets going and data collected each year. And then we also formed a partnership with Pittsburgh Conservation and Shellfish Commissions, the Maine Oyster Company, and Manomet to work on shellfish restoration in the basin. So the idea about bringing an oyster reef back to the basin or seeing if it's possible. So this picture here on the right is Dot Kelly, who sits on the Conservation Commission. She is working with our sand-sized larvae, oyster larvae, and keeping them alive until they settle out on shell. And then we basically will take that shell out to the basin and plant it, see how they do. So we're working on protocols this summer. This project largely happened because my background is in shellfish and aquaculture and fisheries. So I'm excited to be sort of broadening this perspective of encompassing the Pittsburgh Peninsula as sort of where we do research as the college, and really uplift the community by giving, this asset of scientific projects and research. So that's pretty much it from me. I hope that was interesting, and I look forward to your questions.
That was such a lovely video and a very interesting talk too. So I thank you all. So my question is, I know at UMaine, I believe in Orono, they're consulting a lot with the First Nations people of Maine about their traditional lands, about agroecology and all kinds of things. And I'm wondering, so I have two questions. I'm wondering if there's been that kind of connection going on basically with some of this land that, as we all know, belongs to many of the tribes of Maine. And my other question is about some of the areas that I'm concerned about with pesticides. If anybody is doing any scientific research on the effects of pesticides in this beautiful, fairly pristine area that you all just showed us.
Ellen, I love your question. Your first one, I'll take your first one first. That is top of mind. There have been a number of discussions ongoing about that sort of in the broader conservation community in Maine as well. So I've been attending some webinars just to get myself up to speed because it's not an area that I consider myself knowledgeable in. And then within the Bates community, Bev Johnson, Joe Hall, who's in the history department, and I have been talking more just last week, and we have another meeting next week about this specifically for Bates Morse Mountain. Bev is interested because there's a shell midden in the area. And so if we do any research with that, we want to do that, in partnership with Indigenous people on that. So we're working on sort of establishing a research relationship in that realm. Also, I would say this is very preliminary. Our lease with the Bates Morse Mountain Conservation Corporation Board is up for renewal in 2028. So I am starting to think about if there might be an opportunity to, I know some land trusts are doing land acknowledgements and putting things in writing. So I'm exploring that arena and if there are ways to formalize that acknowledgement that this land was essentially, was First Nations. And if we can do that in the lease, I don't know, but I'm exploring that for sure. And then I would, Joe has recommended creating sort of public educational opportunities throughout the conservation area, and that point to sort of historic use of the area, starting with, First Nation use. And there was one other thing I was going to say. I also, in one of the trainings, we have a management plan for the area. And the recommendation from an archaeologist at USM was, put the cultural history in the management plan right up front. So we are definitely, I'm going to add a portion of that to the management plan. We also want to engage students in it. So Joe and I are talking about, I will be teaching a short term with the students living at Shortridge and using, being in Bates Morse Mountain and in Phippsburg. And at the same time, Joe will be teaching an environmental history class and does it in partnership with an Indigenous person. So we are going to combine efforts down at Bates Morse Mountain, have the students engage in some way on that. So, and then in all of that, I forgot your second question, pesticides.
Yeah.
I don't, off the top of my head, we don't use anything that I know of in the conservation area. I believe the houses that are in the conservation area that are owned by the St. John family, they, as far as I know, don't use pesticides.
I was thinking, excuse me for a second, I was thinking more like the effects of farmland, inland, and what are we seeing along the shore, not so much the families that live there.
Yes,
so.
No, you're right, because it is a regional issue with runoff and whatnot. I don't believe anyone is studying that, but I will look more into that and see if there's someone at the college, because I do think that would be a great opportunity for people to get involved, for sure. Yeah. So,
Thank you. Ellen. What wonderful answer. I'm going to put my email in the chat if you can.
Yeah. Great. Follow up, sure.
Thank you.
Kate, it looks like we have another question from Deborah in the class of 71. Deborah, I don't know if you'd like to ask the question yourself. You can go ahead and
Okay,
unmute.
great. Oh, is she?
She needs to unmute.
Okay, I guess I can. Well, I'm interested in what are the factors involved in the decline of the plover and least tern populations and what's changing them in terms of their recovery. And is it an indicator in some way of sea level change or climatic change?
That's a great
Plus,
question.
it's
Deb. Oh, go ahead.
wonderful to see the ocean. I'm in Denver and I just, oh, thank you. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, you're landlocked.
Very.
Yeah. So I would say that I don't know birds as well. Definitely learning, but I would say that their challenges are multifaceted. So I would say that human impacts are pretty big. So in places, seawall is the largest undeveloped barrier beach, right? So where these birds nest inherently is rife with human interaction. And so they are kind of always under pressure from human use of beaches and dogs and predation by coyotes, foxes, et cetera. And so I don't know what the initial decline was caused, or maybe not even initial, but maybe the most recent memory of decline of these populations was caused by, but I do know that, it's required a pretty big effort of conservation. Basically, the Audubon team comes to Seawall on a weekly basis to check every single nest. They put up fencing around most of the nests. They are tracking how many eggs, what happens to the nest, the number of chicks that hatch, what happens to each of those chicks. It's just it's a huge effort to try and get each one to successfully fledge. And then, sort of back to their impacts, their range, they're migrating, so they cover a lot of range. And so I think there's challenges all along the way. Now I'm speculating just from sort of an ecological perspective that, with climate change, I could see that being an impact because we're seeing changes in the timing of things. And so phenology is changing. So I could see, habitat becoming less ideal at the times that the birds are there, which could have impacts on their population outcomes, the success of the chicks, all of that. And that's sort of over a bigger picture. I'm going to stop there because birds are definitely not my area of expertise, but I would be happy to send you, if you want to put your email in the chat, I would send you the Audubon report where they outline sort of what the pressures have been and what it has been a conservation success story, but I do think we're still going to have to watch them closely with these different changes for sure. And you're right, with sea level, there's a potential to lose our beaches that are their habitat, their nesting habitat over time. So hope that was helpful. Sorry, that was kind of rambling.
No, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Bob Muldoon has a question for you. Bob, you want to unmute yourself to answer the question?
Thank you. Besides the plovers and least terns, are there other birds or animals that are monitored somewhat or closely there?
No, we don't have a lot of wildlife monitoring happening in the area. In Laura's files, there looked like there was going to be someone who was going to monitor the fox and coyote populations, but that project didn't come to fruition. And so I would say the research that happens is largely driven by the interests, the faculty interests, the student interests. And then we are open to visiting researchers. So, researchers and scientists from other institutions are able to come and access the area. But we haven't had anyone interested in sort of the wildlife of the area. There are definitely migrating shorebirds in the fall. I'm not exactly sure which species they are, but again, seawall provides really important habitat for them. So it would be interesting to do more of that and get a better understanding of the wildlife in the area. I do know we have coyote, which is cool, and foxes for sure. So thanks, Bob. Sorry, I don't have a better answer.
A quick follow-up. Are
Yeah.
there any bird watching groups that regularly go there? And I mean, they tend to be, citizen scientists to a degree and are pretty good about finding, birds there and keeping lists and maybe developing a historical record if they come regularly.
That would be a great idea, like the Christmas bird count or something like that. Yeah, that I should definitely look into that because I think you're right that this would be a great place for people to engage in science, like citizen science efforts for sure. And I've also thought about that for amphibians, because we do have a lot of vernal pools in the area, and there's the migration for salamanders and whatnot in the early spring. So yeah, great idea, Bob. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna write that down.
I think
Yeah.
like Lewiston has a group, the Stanton Bird Club. I assume they're fairly active and would have expert birder types. And if they added that to their regular walk, you'd get a pretty good survey of all the birds there.
That's a great idea. Yeah, and really build out sort of the long-term data sets for sure. That's great.
Would there be a time for Bates alumni to hop on board and just do any of this volunteering?
Yeah, are you like the field work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I'm not in Maine right now, but I do come every summer. So are there certain projects that you all need more help with than others during the summer?
Email. I am actually working on our summer schedule right now because a lot of it is like low tide dependent. So just let me know when you're in Maine. I guarantee that we will probably be doing a field day at some point, and you're welcome to come because extra hands are always valuable for sure. So yeah, I'll put my email in the chat. So yeah, feel free to reach out. I love field work. So it'd be great to have you along.
Looks like Jack has a question.
I'm curious what updates and changes have been made to Shortridge. The last time I was there, it was pretty sparse, and there wasn't much in terms of facilities.
It is still pretty much the same. I mean, it's basically like the 5 bedrooms, sleep 16. The tent platform is out there. What I was looking to do, we put those solar panels on, and then I was hoping to switch us off of natural gas for heating and move towards heat pumps and to just make it more efficient. But you're right. I would love to explore opportunities to make that space more versatile. And I haven't done it yet, but the National Science Foundation does have planning grants for small field stations to sort of vision infrastructure investments. And so we might move in that direction, and that would give us like the opportunity to talk with faculty at Bates specifically, but then other places that have similar sort of, field stations or marine labs to talk about what's most useful in spaces like that. So yeah, it does it. And we were even more limited this last year when we did have COVID. We were down to, I think, allowing 6 people to sleep there overnight. Yeah, which means, classes can't utilize that. So yeah, it would be great to explore how to best utilize that space and potentially improve it for sure. Thanks, Jack.
Mark and Debbie Warner have a question.
Yes, it's sort of a question and sort of a comment. I've checked the range for the piping plovers, and the piping plover range goes all the way down coast all the way to the Yucatan Peninsula, actually. And their winter range changes around North Carolina. So they're in Maine during the summertime, but then they migrate all along the coast. I live about 45 minutes from South Padre Island, and you can see piping plovers down there in the wintertime. One of the downsides of that for us is we don't see them with their breeding plumage because they don't breed here. The other thing is that I was thinking about the Christmas bird count, which I'll have to tell you is a lot more enjoyable here than in Maine, you can have a Christmas bird count in a specific area. For example, we have not too far from here a salt lake, and near that salt lake, they just have a Christmas bird count in that salt lake environs. Now, it seems to me, I never really got to appreciate, we moved from Maine in 1999, so we haven't been to Morse Mountain since before that. And it seems to me the potential for a Christmas bird count just in the Morse Mountain Preserve is a possibility from the standpoint of both shorebirds that winter over and in the woodland area. So that has that potential, but you would need a club willing to adopt and do that. So that's an issue. And then, of course, depending on how in the area of Christmas, ours is usually like the first Saturday after the New Year, the one we participate in. But so it's not a specifically Christmas Day kind of thing. But that has a potential. The other thing that has potential is we down here at least have what's called a big sit. And a big sit, there are certain days where they do it down here, but there's nothing that said you couldn't have a big sit on any given day that you wanted to. And the big sit is you sit in an area, and from the point where you are sitting, any birds you see are logged in the big sit, and the number of species you see. So something near the shore, but yet also in the woodland, near the woodland, would give you a wider variety of birds and more species as a potential. It would be a good way to monitor bird species in that area.
Great. I wrote those down. Big sit and the Christmas bird count in both the beach and the woodland area. Thank you. That'd be great.
Kate, it looks like we have a question in the chat from Judy Martin, class of 66. She said that she remembers that there's at least one fund at Bates that's going to help fund student research, and wonders if there's a need for more funding and what kind of work could that enable?
Oh, good question, Judy. Yes. So short answer is yes. Funding for student research is great. It just really allows students to get the full experience. They can live at Shortridge for the summer, and they can do their thesis research over the summer months, and then work up the data when they're back on campus during the academic year. And I know personally, these kinds of experiences are what, set students on a path, right? Into conservation work or into other work. And these can be really transformative experiences. And there is the Trafton Family Fund, where that will eventually be dedicated to student research. And then the Small Point community, actually, we are restarting. They are going to fund at least one student position on an annual basis. And the kind of work that they could do is really across disciplines. So they could keep doing sort of the marsh work that Bev Johnson leads. They can keep doing the sediment transport work that Mike Rattel does. But then also I'm hoping to sort of broaden the type of work. I mean, Don Dearborn, I know, studies birds, so he would likely be able to advise a student on a bird project in that area. And then I'm hoping to be able to offer students the opportunity to work on marine and coastal issues as well with the Basin Restoration Project. So there's tons of ideas. And my goal is to kind of keep a running list of projects, because what I find with the thesis projects with students, it's often just making sure that there's a really strong match between the students' interests and what the need is, so that they're successful, because that's what we want. Is we really want them to have a successful and exciting experience doing field work and seeing a project through from start to finish. So thank you, Judy, for that question. And we should also say that Judy was the director of Bates Morse Mountain too, so might actually have a better answer to some of these questions than me. But Judy, good to see you. Looking forward to walking with you next week too.
So we've reached our 2 o'clock time for this event, and I want to really thank Caitlin for her time and energy. This has been great.